Well guys, the prequel trilogy reviews are out of the way. Looking forward to jumping into some covered ground that I've already did with Solo and Rogue One. So let's go ahead and do Solo. Solo stars Alden Ehrenreich, Emilia Clarke, Paul Bettany, Woody Harrelson, and is directed by Ron Howard. What's up guys, it's Star Wars review time again. The prequel trilogy is out of the way. I've done 1, 2, and 3. Had a lot of fun going through those two actually. I like some parts of the prequel trilogy. I had some really interesting comments in there. Some people even said my reviews made them want to go back and rewatch the prequel trilogy, which I think is really cool. But I'm having fun doing these, and now I'm going to have some real fun because if you remember, I just reviewed Solo I think 8 months ago when it came out back in May, and I hadn't watched it since, and so I threw in the 4K recently. This is the first time I've watched this movie since I bought it when it first came out, and I think I wanted to save it for when I was going to do this run because I knew I was going to give this one another watch, maybe give it some fresh eyes, you know. And I'm glad I did actually, because I will say I did enjoy this one much more this time, and I did like it the first time. But you know, just to go into, I guess, the backstory of Solo, Force Awakens came out, was this massive hit. It's the highest grossing film domestically of all time, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Disney and Kathleen Kennedy and company, they wanted to strike while the iron was hot. You know, Last Jedi trailer came out. Everybody freaked out about that trailer. Who could lose, right? When Last Jedi, the trailer came out, everybody thought, this is a slam dunk. There's no way this movie is not going to be good. So we've already put out Rogue One. Let's continue doing some more of these one-off Star Wars movies. And one of them that came up was Solo. There was also the Obi-Wan Kenobi story. There was also the Boba Fett movie that was supposed to come out. But the big problem that they did with these movies was they released Solo way too quick after Last Jedi because they thought this was going to be a slam dunk and then it'll be a 1-2 punch. Who would have thought that The Last Jedi would have caused such a ginormous divide amongst Star Wars fans, including myself? It is a very conflicting film, which is one that I am definitely looking forward to re-reviewing. I've watched the movie like 3 times now, and I'm not going to go too deep into my new thoughts on the movie, but I've shared it on social media. I don't like this movie as much as I did from that first review. But going back to Solo, Solo came out 6 months after, and we were still thick into the fog of the Last Jedi controversy. There were people that pretty much said, I will never go see a Star Wars movie again because I am that pissed off at Last Jedi. That's ridiculous, in my opinion. And plus, there's only one Star Wars movie to go after this one. Although Rian Johnson was given another trilogy to do outside of this run. Who knows if that's going to happen now? Probably not. But you know, when I watched that movie, I watched it amongst that fog. It was like I was parting the fog and poking my head in, and oh, here's this little Solo movie right here. This could be interesting. So now I watched it with fresh eyes. I didn't have all that haze around me. And it's really refreshing to watch this movie as just a movie. And I found myself really interested in what was going on, really curious as to what could come, because this financially is the worst grossing Star Wars movie of the bunch. It's got to be like the lowest grossing movie of the bunch. I haven't done my full-on research, but if I'm doing like the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, I don't think this one grossed as much as any of those movies. And it sure as hell didn't gross as much as Force Awakens and Last Jedi. Now, I'm not including those holiday specials and all that side stuff. That Clone Wars movie that came out that was completely horrible. But this was Han Solo. This was the story of Han Solo, one of the most beloved characters of the Star Wars universe. But first off, we see a very young Han Solo. This takes place 10 years, I believe, before the events of A New Hope. And really, he's just a criminal, kind of a deadbeat. You know, he's not like settled in. He has this girlfriend on his home planet of Corellia. and he's always in trouble. We know that about Han Solo. That's the fun thing about the character. But at the beginning of the movie, him and his girlfriend Kira, played by Emilia Clarke, they are, I guess, kind of accidentally separated. They're going away together, you know, getting away from Corellia. And Han Solo ends up joining the army of the Empire. But it's literally one of those things where both of them are going through the door and only one of them gets out. Which is kind of too easy in my book, but, you know, we got a story to tell and we got to split these characters up, so that's how we do it. And by the way, in that scene, this is where we find out how Han got his last name Solo, which was way too freaking easy. Did not expect that, but sometimes easy's not a bad thing, right? It works. I mean, he doesn't have to have this grand reason why his last name is Solo. I mean, if a name is really, you know, catchy, does the story behind the name have to be that important? Probably not. But I do love this portion of the movie. It looks like kind of a war movie, you know? It's all dark and gritty. We've never seen, like, the stormtroopers in the midst of, like, a battle, kind of like World War II-like, you know? And this is where he meets Beckett, played by Woody Harrelson, and his crew. Now, this is just a group of smugglers, a group of criminals. They are working under Dryden Voss, played by Paul Bettany. But, you know, Han Solo, he's in this world for, like, 3 years. This is when he meets them. And so he is wanting to get away from the Empire. You know, he's a loner. He doesn't want to be a part of any one crew. And he certainly doesn't want to be a part of the Empire. He doesn't really buy into their mission. Look, that's one thing I love about the character of Han Solo. He doesn't want to be controlled. He goes to the beat of his own drum. Who doesn't love a character like that, you know? I've always associated myself with these, you know, John Rambo, I guess, type characters that are kind of set aside from society. They don't abide by the rules. And Han Solo, I think, might be one of my favorite characters in the Star Wars universe because of that. You know, he's just got that swagger about him, and the swagger is definitely in this movie. So then we get to this big train sequence with the Marauders. The Marauders are really cool looking people too. I like a visually stunning group of criminals. And that whole sequence, I mean, you know, pretty much soup to nuts, is such a cool sequence. Visually, it's awesome looking. It almost looks like a Hoth type setting where, you know, it's very snowy and wintry, and they're on this train. And Beckett and his crew, they're trying to steal parts off of the train. But then also, I love that music that they use in this. This is the first time we were introduced to some, like, brand new Star Wars music that, to me, is really interesting sounding. Like, if I had to pick apart one thing about Force Awakens and a little bit of Last Jedi, I don't think the music was as full of a meal as it was, say, in, like, the prequel trilogy. You know, if I had to give the prequel trilogy, like, the greatest compliment, it would be in the music department. But this scene is so freaking cool. I love the way it looks. It's action-packed, and it's a good way to get to know the characters. Beck and his crew, they're in deep shit. Beckett's lady friend, Val, she ends up giving her life for this mission. So there's a lot of emotional weight to play with there. And I will say, that is like one of my favorite segments of the movie, actually. But then you also have these like life lesson moments between Beckett and Solo. Because, like I said, this is a young Solo. And before this movie even came out, I was so against the thought of anybody playing Han Solo outside of Harrison Ford. But, you know, the character was in his 30s and on in the original trilogy. So it is kind of interesting to see a very young, unseasoned Han Solo. You know, if he made some mistakes in the original trilogy, he really makes a lot of mistakes in this series. There's so many funny segments in the movie where he's like bullshitting his way out of any situation that he's in. Han Solo, at his core, is the ultimate bullshitter.
The money.
They kept it.
And my collection.
They kept that too, but we learned a very valuable lesson. We cannot trust those guys.
And I love characters like that. But after this segment, this is where we first meet Dryden Voss, played by Paul Bettany. I will say in my first review, I kind of unfairly treated Dryden Voss as a criminal. You know, I compared him to Darth Vader, and how can you compare anybody to Darth Vader? And I was wrong. I will say I was wrong. After watching it this time, Dryden Voss to me was an interesting character, and he is probably like the most human villain we've had in the Star Wars universe, which is really refreshing, actually. And, you know, where Darth Vader was, you know, no bones about it, you are in deep shit if you get on his bad side. Dryden Voss would seduce you in a way, and then he would kill you. He would give you like this pep talk, say you're doing a great job, but then at the end of it, he would slip in, oh, by the way, I will kill you if you fail me.
Oh, and just one more thing. If you do fail me again, we'll all be out of options.
So I actually like villains like that. You know, I guess you could say they're kind of multi-dimensional. But this is where we see that bombshell with Qi'ra, played by Emilia Clarke. This is where Han Solo reunites with her. But she is being controlled by Dryden Voss. And you almost get the feeling that she is being romantic with him, or, you know, not willingly. Not that the guy's like raping her or anything, but I'm just saying she's doing what she has to do to survive. And sometimes women do some horrible things to survive. So this is like a conflicting thing for Han Solo. Like, this is the woman that I pretty much wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And now she's being controlled by this complete asshole. But through all that, Han Solo, he keeps his wits about him, and he accepts this mission to do the Kessel Run. Remember that big old scene in A New Hope where he said the Millennium Falcon could do the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs?
Fast ship. You've never heard of the Millennium Falcon?
Should I have?
It's a ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs.
Which I will touch on as far as like parsecs being a measure of distance and not speed. And that will tie into a big plot hole in The Last Jedi, which we'll talk about over The Last Jedi, because it shouldn't have been able to split that ship in half. Think of it as like teleportation. That's what parsecs really mean. So it's interesting that this story kind of fixes a screw up that Rian Johnson did with the story of The Last Jedi. Or I guess not fixes, because that's the way it was in the first place. Now, the Kessel Run sequence in this movie is probably one of the best sequences outside of the train sequence. The action scenes in this movie are awesome, actually.
Just have to find a faster route.
There isn't one. You can't make the Kessel Run in less than 20 parsecs.
Watch me. I got a really good feeling about this.
But what I loved about the Kessel Run sequence was the Maw. There's this segment of the movie called the Maw where it's this like cluster of black holes. And it's the one area of the galaxy where you do not want to get stuck, because you will get lost forever. Nobody is going to be stupid enough to fly into the Maw, except Han Solo, of course. And that's another reason why we love Han Solo. He's the type of guy that doesn't have a plan, you know? He just says, we'll do it and we'll figure out the plan along the way. But in order to get into the Maw, he has to get his ship, which is the Millennium Falcon. And he meets Lando Calrissian, played by Donald Glover. You could not have picked a better guy to play Lando Calrissian than Donald Glover. He really just nails the part. He looks the part. He really looks like Billy Dee Williams. And I love, there's that one scene where after Han Solo completely just obliterates his ship, he says, I hate you. And what does Han Solo say? I know. Isn't that awesome?
I hate you. I know.
And I didn't pick up on that on the first time I watched this movie. And when I watched it this time, I just gut laughed. But really, Han Solo kind of like cheats Lando out of his ship. But Lando cheated during the card game anyway, so I guess it's kind of even. Both of the guys are just complete bullshit artists. So it's like, what do you get when you have two characters like that and they're just constantly cheating each other? It's just really fun. And I will say, this is how you do Star Wars comedy. I hate to bring up The Last Jedi again, but one of my big problems with The Last Jedi is the dealing of the comedy and how the comedy doesn't fit certain characters. Because Star Wars movies do have comedy in them, but Han Solo is a character, Lando Calrissian is a character that suits comedy. General Hux is supposed to be like a Tarkin type of character. There should be no comedy with Tarkin. See, I'm already bleeding over into The Last Jedi. I apologize, people. But I'm just comparing, okay? But then, the last part of this movie is when we see who the Marauders really are. The leader of the Marauders, Enfys, she actually takes off her helmet. We didn't know it was a her in the first place, but then we find out it is a her. And we had that whole switcheroo with Dryden Voss and the coaxium, because Dryden Voss didn't think the coaxium was the coaxium, but it was the coaxium. And I guess I like saying coaxium. And why is coaxium so important? Because it's pretty much like a hypermatter. It makes faster than light travel possible. That's really all it is. Hyperspace is a very important element in the Star Wars galaxy. We see it all the time, especially with the Millennium Falcon. But in the end, we find out that there is a boss that's above Dryden Voss. And Qi'ra is working directly for an organization called Crimson Dawn. And we don't find out who the leader of Crimson Dawn is until the end of Solo. And that leader being, you guessed it, Darth Maul. When Darth Maul showed up in this thing, I really sat up in my chair. That was such a cool moment in this movie, actually, because Darth Maul is like one of my favorite characters in the Star Wars universe, even though he's only in the first movie like 10 minutes. But seeing him show up again and seeing that he is a very important character in the Star Wars universe was so refreshing. And that particular scene really made me want to go back and like research the backstory of Solo and the Marauders and Enfys. And there's also this theory out there that Enfys is actually Darth Maul's daughter. It doesn't come out and say that, but if you put the pieces together, it kind of makes sense. So really, that's the big takeaway from Solo, is that there's a lot of like, what if, you know? And where could the next movie go? Like, you could do a trilogy out of Solo, and you could like tie it into like Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan went against Darth Maul in Phantom Menace. So you could do an Obi-Wan movie where Darth Maul and Crimson Dawn come into the fold, and then they have to have another fight against each other. I'd be totally down for that. But unfortunately, because of the financial failure of Solo, it's not going to happen. Now, also, as far as any cons for Solo, I will say the look of the movie could have been a little brighter, because there are some interesting colors throughout this movie. It's like each act of the movie has its own color palette, or I guess each location that Solo ends up going to has its own color palette. And sometimes it was just really damn dark, I will say. I saw a joke on the internet. They said Solo is like the Taco Bell of the Star Wars franchise. It looks like Taco Bell. I don't know what I'm saying. But I will say, guys, I had a blast with Solo this last time I watched it. It's definitely one that I'm going to watch in my Star Wars runs. And Star Wars runs, that doesn't make any sense. And it sounds disgusting. And I said Taco Bell before that. Anyway, Solo, I'm giving it a purchase worthy. I don't remember what, I didn't watch my last review because I didn't want to like restate myself. But I think I might have gave it a humdrum. I'm not sure, but I'm definitely giving it a purchase worthy. Had a lot of fun with it, actually. And I'm really looking forward to Rogue One. So Rogue One, we're going to be reviewing that one next week. Anyway, guys, post in the comments your thoughts on Solo. Looking forward to hearing them. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we just passed 7,000 members. How awesome is that? Be sure to check out my previous Star Wars reviews that I've done so far, episode 1, 2, and 3. And also, somebody did bring up that Star Wars fan film, Shards of the Past. I will definitely be reviewing that. I'm so curious to check that out. I'm going to wait until I get through this whole run, and then I'll check out Shards of the Past, and I will review it. So anyway, guys, if you like what I'm doing, hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and may the Force be with you.